Officials in Russia's Rostov region are on the scene of a fatal shelling reported to have been fired from Ukrainian territory. The shelling killed one man and injured two women in Donetsk, a town of the same name as the city in eastern Ukraine.
Russia's foreign ministry condemned the attack and blamed Ukrainian government forces. State-owned news agency The Voice of Russia quotes a Russian diplomat saying this is a qualitatively higher degree of danger to our citizens. Therefore, a démarche will be tough and precise.
Dangerous but always darkly entertaining is Europe's answer to Arnold Schwarzenegger, pumping and flexing those incredible muscles. That scamp Vladimir Putin is back in the news, wheeling and dealing under the dictator table. This and more from the other side of the pond. We welcome back columnist and author of Delta, currently available in the Kindle edition on Amazon. Todd Wood joins us once again. We now call him the man in a suitcase. Todd, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You are now out of the suitcase, and that is good news here as well. We heard that soundbite there that started things out. Here we have the Ukraine shelling the border. Russia says it was a deliberate attack. Ukraine denies responsibility. Todd, why do I get the feeling that this is almost like the Ukrainians poking the bear?
Well, you know, Russia is just waiting for an excuse to really cause some problems. They've moved about 12,000 troops back to the border. Putin is a master of, you know, escalating and de-escalating at the right time to try and get what he wants. I don't think Ukraine is trying to, you know, really poke Russia. I think it's the other way around, actually. I think Russia is really looking to try and start something here.
What about the economic, let's put this all together, economic, political, military costs of any real abrupt action here by Putin at this point to try and keep the Ukraine? There are those who say that it's simply just been deemed far too high at this point for Putin, that he might have overreached a little bit and now he needs to just sit back and wait for things to settle down. Where do you stand on this? What are we hearing over in Europe?
You know, Europe would like to just make this go away, but unfortunately, it's not going to. You know, there is a real effort with Russian propaganda to try and destabilize NATO, and they're very good at this. And actually, NATO has recently suggested that they need to try and counter the Russian propaganda machine because it's been so effective in this whole conflict from the beginning, and it's really concerning them because it's influencing populations. And you know, the Europeans want this to go away. It's not going to. Putin is going to continue until he gets what he wants, which is really Ukraine, not a force on his border, destabilized, and you know, wary of going into the European orbit.
What are we to make now of the coziness between German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Vladimir Putin?
Well, you know, that's one of the fascinating things about this that most people don't understand. Merkel grew up in East Germany, so she was part of the behind the Iron Curtain. She speaks fluent Russian, and you know, Putin has been courting her from a diplomatic standpoint very strongly throughout this whole crisis. She has influenced by several of the foreign ministers, which she's very friendly with on the Russian side. And you know, there is a definite connection between Putin and Merkel. They talk all the time. They talked recently with this plane being shot down. So, yes, Russia would love to pull Germany over to their side. I mean, think about it. If Germany joined the Eurasian Economic Union with China and Russia, and that would be one powerhouse to deal with. And I think that's going to be Obama's legacy, is really the destruction of NATO as we knew it.
All right, now you bring up NATO here, and I wanted to talk about Merkel for a second, but let me get right to NATO. Is there a fear, is it real, when we see this, that people are say that Putin is afraid that the Ukraine will join NATO, NATO will move in there? Is that a reality in this situation here, or is that just sort of far-fetched?
It's not going to happen in Ukraine. I mean, if it would have happened in Ukraine, it would have happened a long time ago. We actually did not forward deploy troops in NATO on Russia's border along the Baltics and Poland and elsewhere because we didn't want to offend Russia. I mean, that didn't do us a lot of good. We've had to scramble and try to get troops back in that area. I mean, that has been the excuse that Russia has used, Putin especially, saying that, you know, NATO is threatening them by moving all these troops to former Soviet territories, which is true. You know, the European, if you notice, the East Europeans are the ones screaming the loudest for sanctions against Russia because they understand living under the Russian boot, if you will. So, yes, I mean, that was an issue. I don't think it's an issue in Ukraine.
There are some people who will look at what's happening here and they look at Putin basically trying to get the Ukraine and other satellites back under Russian control. And despite the fact that we make fun, I make fun and others do of Putin sometimes, and sometimes the cartoonish things that he does in order to make sure that he keeps himself public relations viable, there are those who very seriously see what is happening now as a real threat to global security again. That Vladimir Putin, no doubt about it, is trying to put together the Russia that will be just as powerful as it once was, that will once again be able to stare down the Americans and the Europeans, and will once again be that second power rivaling number one in the planet. Now, looking at all that we have here, with Putin putting it together economically, things that he's doing right now, is this really possible? And if it is possible, what are we looking at here? A year, 2 years, a few years down the road, or even sooner?
Putin's very patient. I think we're a ways away from that happening, although events on the ground have been speeding up very, very fast recently. I've mentioned that it's not just the Soviet Union, it's 1,000 years of Russian empire that he wants to put back together. And he's very effective at seeing opportunity and moving when the opportunity is there, and then stepping back a little bit and biding his time. And I think that's exactly what he's doing. He's going to run for another term. That's almost a foregone conclusion. The Russian people support him, although there has been a dampening down of the aggressive war propaganda against Ukraine within Russia, and I think they may be trying to massage the Russian people that they're not going to get everything they want in Ukraine. But then you see Putin shooting down an airplane recently. So it's hard to predict this guy.
What, if anything, then, is a consensus opinion that Europe and the United States can do in order to get in this guy's way, in order to properly blunt whatever he may be thinking about and stop what could be the formation of that new global threat?
Well, Russia is, I wouldn't say scared, but they are worried about the threat from NATO militarily. That is defeated them in the Cold War, and we have to maintain NATO as a functioning alliance against Eastern aggression, and that's what Putin knows, and that's what he's trying to prevent happening by courting Germany, by causing trouble in some of the former Soviet republics. Estonia has a 40% Russian-speaking population. He doesn't have to take over Estonia. He just has to stir up trouble, and they have a vote and say they want to join Russia. And then what happens? I mean, we have an Article 5 treaty obligation there. So NATO, first of all, has to be strong and united. And that takes leadership on the American side, and we don't have that. And that's quite scary. The other thing is that we have to make it very clear to him that aggression, through Ukraine or in other areas will not be tolerated and will be dealt with. We can deal with it economically. We can hurt Russia in a very short period of time if we want to. It just, we have to make sure that's the right thing to do, and then do it if we need to.
A couple of minutes we have left here. Working off what you just said, is there a consensus or an idea here that if the United States does not get further behind NATO, does not push, does not really become that driving force with NATO, that the will for NATO in order to stop Russia is just not there, that it's just not enough unless America really gets behind him?
Oh, I think that's exactly right. I think Putin senses that, and he is working to undermine the relationship, especially with Germany, with the United States. I mean, there's a poll recently in Germany that 60% approximately of the German population want to be neutral, and treat Russia and the United States the same way. That is a shocking number, that they have come that far due to the incompetence recently of this administration.
With regard then to Germany, it's interesting because we've had the whole case here where the American CIA agent has been expelled. Hey, Todd, come on, you travel through Europe extensively here. Everybody, and I mean everybody, spies on everybody else. Everybody has had it. The governments have been doing this now for decades. It's nothing new right here. In reality here, what is being said in Europe, and what is your sense that, is this really going to be something that will seriously affect the relationship, or honestly, is this just saber rattling at this time between Germany and America?
Yes, everybody spies, but again, it's leadership, and it is, competence, and not making your allies look, stupid. I mean, the whole Snowden thing, and having us say that, come out that we were spying on Merkel's phone for several years. I mean, that was devastating, much more than any of the evidence that came out with Snowden, I think, because it destroyed the relationship with this a very strong and needed ally. So that is a problem. And yes, if we don't deal with it, I guess if we don't get leadership in the White House who can lead the free world, the free world will fall apart. I think we're seeing that right now.
15 seconds left here. Safe to say that people in Europe right now don't respect the American leadership at all.
No, we're not even at the table anymore, and that is shocking and frightening.
All right, let's go ahead and show people again. The book we want to go ahead and point out is available through Amazon. It is Delta. It is now in the Kindle edition, written by Todd Wood, who is now officially our man in a suitcase. Todd, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. We'll do it again real soon.
Thank you very much, Ed. Talk to you later.
All right, coming up next, a trip to Outland, where a certain town in Florida is caught employing law enforcement that didn't mind wearing two sets of uniforms. One for enforcing the law, another for selecting whom they would enforce those laws for. It's all coming up right here on MidPoint, where we question everything.